Chapter 20. Moments later, Eleanor led them from the gardens, cowls drawn close about their faces and cloaks laced tight. They slipped through the gates and past a series of the Black Watch and started back toward the city. The druid did not offer any explanation as to where he was taking them, and they did not ask. They walked in silence, Eleanor a step or two ahead, Will and Amberleaf following. Both were exhausted. The Veilman glanced often at the elven girl, more worried about her than he cared to admit, even to himself. But she gave little indication of her emotional state, and he caught only an occasional glimpse of her face within the covering of the hood. Once he asked quietly if she was all right, and she nodded back to him without speaking. A short time afterward they found themselves approaching the manor house of the Elfstones. Beckoning wordlessly, Eleanor led them onto the grounds surrounding the darkened home, directing them through a screen of pine that bordered the south lawn, then along a series of hedgerows to a small alcove and a pair of floor-length glass windows draped in heavy shadows. Standing before the doors, Eleanor tapped softly on the glass. There was a moment's wait, then the curtains covering the window moved slightly. The latch within was released, and the doors swung open. Quickly, Eleanor motioned them through, glanced furtively about and followed, closing the doors behind him. They stood for a few seconds in darkness, listening to the faint sound of footfalls as someone moved slowly about the room. Then a light was struck to a candle's wick. Will found that they were in a small study, burnished oak from walls and shelving, gleaming in the candle's dim flame. Soft tracings of colour from leather-bound books and tapestries visible through the heavy shadows. At the far side of the little room, an aged wolfhound raised his grizzled head from a small earthen-coloured rug on which he lay and thumped his tail in greeting. Eventine Elfstone placed a candle on a small work table and turned to face them. "Is everything arranged?" Eleanor's deep voice broke the stillness. The old king nodded. "And your household?" The druid was already moving across the room to the single door that led into the west of the home. He opened it, looked through briefly, then closed it again. "Everyone sleeps but Darden and Roe, and they stand watch at my bedroom door, believing me asleep as well. There is no one here but old Manx." The wolfhound glanced over at the mention of his name, then lowered his head between his paws and closed his eyes. Eleanor walked back across the room. "Then we can begin." He motioned Will and Amberley to take chairs about the work table, drawing a third chair over for himself. The Veilman sat wearily. Amberley started forward, then stopped, her eyes on her grandfather. Eventine looked back at her, hesitated, then moved quickly to embrace her. The elven girl went rigid for a moment, then her arms went about him. "I love you, grandfather," she whispered. "I missed you." The old king did not speak, but nodded into her shoulder, one hand coming up to stroke her hair. Then he took her head gently in his hands and tilted it back so that she was facing him. "What has happened is behind us, Amberley. Forgotten. There will be no more harsh words between us. This is your home. I want you here with me, with your family." The elven girl shook her head sadly. "I have spoken with the outcries, grandfather. She has told me that I am her chosen. She has given me her seed." The old man's face went pale and his eyes dropped. "I am sorry, Amberley. I know that you wish it could be otherwise. Believe me, I wish it could be otherwise too." "I know you do," she replied, but there was despair in her eyes. She separated from him and seated herself at the table with Eleanor and Will. The king remained standing for a moment, his eyes staring over at his granddaughter. There was a lost and frightened look to him that suggested a child strayed. Slowly he recovered himself, then moved to sit with the others. Eleanor leaned forward, hands folding carefully atop the table. "Eventine and I agreed at the close of the High Council that we would meet in secret later this night. What is said here shall remain between the four of us and no other. Time slips away from us, and we must act quickly. If we are to save the elven people, the outcries is failing. Soon the demons contained within the forbidding will break through into the four lands. Eventide and I shall be there to meet them when they do. But you, Amberley, and you also will, must go in search of the Bloodfire. He turned to the elven girl. I would go with you if I could. I would go with you if there were any possible way to do so, but there is not. One of the demons that has already broken through the forbidding as well as some still locked within possess powers that your grandfather and the elven people cannot stand against without my help. It will be my task to shield the elves from those powers. Sorcery to withstand sorcery. It must be so. But in my place I will send Will Omsford, and I have not chosen lightly to entrust your care and safety to him. It was his grandfather who went with me in search of the sword of Shannara, who found it, and who then stood alone against the Warlock Lord and saw him destroyed. His great-uncle Flick once saved your grandfather's life. Will has a strength of character that marked both men. He has their sense of honour. You have seen that he holds the Elfstone that I once gave to his grandfather. He will protect you as I would. He will stand with you, Amberley. He will not fail you. There was a long moment of silence. The Veilman felt embarrassed by the druid's words, embarrassed and uneasy. He was not so sure of himself. He glanced quickly at Amberley and found her staring back at him. You are a chosen in service to the outcries, Eleanor continued, drawing the elven girl's eyes back to meet his own. Though we all might wish it were otherwise, the matter has been settled as we agreed that it should be. You are the last of the chosen, and therefore the last hope of your people. You alone can restore the forbidding, a terrible responsibility, Amberley, but it belongs to you. If you fail, demon and elf will do battle until one or both have been utterly destroyed. The Outcries has given you her seed, and so you must take it in quest of the Bloodfire. That will not be easily done. The Bloodfire lies within a place called Safehold, and Safehold is a part of the old world. The world is gone, forever changed, down through the ages. The place called Safehold has been all but forgotten. Even the Outcries no longer recognizes the path that leads there. If not for the Druid histories, Safehold might have been irretrievably lost to us. Yet, the histories are a link between past and present. I have read them and know where Safehold lies. He paused. It lies within the Wilderun. No one said a word. There was no need. Even Will Omsford, a Southlander and a Veilman who until now had never set foot in the Westland, had heard of the Wilderun. Buried within the forests that lay south of the Elven homeland, it was a treacherous and forbidding stretch of wilderness, virtually encircled by mountains and swamp. Fewer than half a dozen hamlets could be found there, and those were peopled by thieves, cutthroats, and outlaws of every conceivable sort. Even they seldom strayed far from their villages, or the few well-worn trails that crisscrossed the region, for in the timber beyond, the rumours said, were creatures no man would care to encounter. Will took a deep breath. You wouldn't happen to know where within the Wilderun we are to find the Bloodfire? Eleanor shook his head. I cannot be sure. Even the Druid histories refer in part to the geography of the old world, and the landmarks that existed then are gone. You will have to rely on the Elfstones. I thought as much. The Veilman sagged back in his chair. You saw the Elfstones will tell the demons where we can be found. Unfortunately true. You will have to exercise great discretion. Will, I will relate to you what the Outcries told the Chosen about Safehold before they were slain. What she later also told me, this may help you in your search. The Bloodfire lies within a wilderness with mountains and swamp all around. Obviously the Wilderun, as the Druid histories record. Now here is the rest of what she said. There is a deep mist that comes and goes. Within the wilderness can be found a lone peak. Beneath the peak is a maze of tunnels that burrowed deep within the earth. Somewhere within the maze is a door made of glass that will not break. Behind the door you will find the Bloodfire. He cocked his head reflectively. As you can see, the general description of the Wilderun remains surprisingly accurate, even after the passage of so many years, and the cataclysmic changes wrought in the geography of the earth by the great wars. Perhaps the balance of the description remains accurate as well. Perhaps the Bloodfire may still be found beneath a lone peak within a maze of tunnels. He shrugged. I would give you more help if I had it to give, but I do not. You must do the best you can with that. Will managed to feint a somewhat forced smile of encouragement. He did not dare look over at Amberley. How do we reach the Wilderun? He asked. The druid glanced questioningly at Eventine, but the Elven King appeared preoccupied. At last, distracted by the silence, he looked over at Alanon and nodded absently. Everything has been arranged. The druid seemed to hesitate, then turned to Amberley. Your grandfather has selected Captain Crispin, who commands the Home Guard, to be your guide and protector on this journey. Crispin is a very resourceful and courageous soldier. He will serve you well. He has been instructed to choose half a dozen elven hunters as your escort. 6 is a small number, but a small number may be best in this case. It will attract far less attention than a large command, and it should enable you to travel more swiftly. The plan that the king and I have settled on is this. You will be taken from the city in secret. The means have been left to Captain Crispin. Only Crispin will be aware of your mission. He and the elven under his command will go with you as far as you need them. All will have been instructed that no harm is to befall you, that they are to do whatever is necessary to protect you. Alanon, it was Eventine who spoke, glancing over suddenly, a worried look on his face. His penetrating blue eyes found those of the druid. There is something I have not told you yet. I did not speak of this before because we had only those few moments at the close of the council. But I think something should be said now. There is reason for concern in this venture beyond the obvious danger of being tracked by the demons who have pursued you this far. He leaned forward, arms crossing loosely on the table to support his weight. His face, caught in the dim light of the candle, seemed very old. You know how the Chosen died. Perhaps Will and Amberley do not. His gaze shifted. They were torn apart, mangled almost beyond recognition. Horror reflected in the faces of the elven girl and the Valeman. The king put his hand gently on his granddaughter's shoulder. I do not tell you this to frighten you more, Amberley, nor you will, but because of this. He looked back at Alanon. Since you have been gone from Avalon, there have been more deaths, like those of the Chosen. A great many deaths. Whatever it was that killed them has been roaming the surrounding country, systematically destroying everything and everyone it encounters, man or beast, young or old. Over 50 elves have died, all in the same manner, all by being ripped apart. 3 nights ago, an entire patrol was waylaid and destroyed. 6 armed men. A week earlier, an army compound at the north edge of the city was invaded, and 20 men were killed while they slept. There has been an increasing number of demons sighted in the Westlands since the outcries began to fail, and more than a few unpleasant pish fights as well. But nothing on this order. Nothing as deliberate and premeditated. This creature knows what it is about. It kills with purpose. We have tried without success to track it. We cannot find it. We have not even seen it. No one has. But it is out there, and it hunts us. He paused. It was sent once, Alanon, for the purpose of destroying the Chosen. It did so, all but one, and maybe that it will be sent again. Amberley had gone white. Eleanor rubbed his bearded chin thoughtfully. Yes, there was a demon in the old days, he mused. A demon that killed out of instinctive need. They called it a reaper. I don't care what they called it, Will spoke up suddenly. What I want to know is how to avoid it. Secrecy, the druid offered. However vicious and cunning this demon will have no more reason than his brethren to suspect that you have left Avalon. But believes that you are still here. If they all believe that you are still here, they will not be looking for you elsewhere. Perhaps we can give them that impression. He turned to Eventide. The time will come very soon now when the outcries can no longer maintain the wall of the forbidding, with sufficient strength to contain the remainder of the demons still imprisoned within. When that time comes, the demons will concentrate their strength at the wall's weakest point and break free. We cannot wait for that to happen. We must find the place where they will attempt their crossover and do what we can to prevent it. Even if we fail, we can fight a delaying action, which will slow them in their march on Avalon. They will try to march here, for they will seek to destroy the outcries. They must. They cannot tolerate her. Remember that while she was strong, she was an enigma to them. But as she weakens, she becomes less so. Once they have broken through her wall, they will move quickly to destroy her. We must do what we can to prevent that. We must give Amberley time to reach the Bloodfire and return again. We must keep the demons from Avalon until then. So, he let the word hang for a moment in the silence of the little room. We shall deceive the demons who are already through the forbidding by acting as if preparations to seek the Bloodfire are yet to be completed. We shall make it appear as if you have not left. The demons know that it was I who brought Amberley here. They will expect me to be with her when she leaves. We can make use of that. We can focus their attention on me. By the time they realize that they have been misled, you should be well beyond their reach. Unless their spy is more resourceful than you anticipate, Will wanted to say, but he decided not to. It all sounds very promising, he said instead. That seems to settle everything except the matter of when we should leave. The druid leaned back in his chair. You will leave at dawn. Will stared at him in disbelief. At dawn? Tomorrow? Amberley sprang to her feet. That is impossible, druid. We are exhausted. We have not slept in almost 2 days. We have to have more than a few hours rest before setting out again. Eleanor held up his hand. Peace, elven girl. I understand this as well as you. But consider. The demons know that you have come here for the purpose of carrying the seed of the outcries to the Bloodfire. They know that you will attempt to leave the city, and they will be watching closely. But they will not be watching as closely now as they will in a day or two. Do you know why? Because they will expect you to rest first. That is exactly why you must leave at once. Surprise offers you your best chance to slip past them. Understanding flickered in Will's eyes. This was the advantage that the druid had hoped his deception at the High Council might yield them. There will be enough sufficient rest for you after you are gone from the city, Eleanor promised. 2 days of travel will enable you to reach the Elven outpost in Dray Wood. You can catch up on your lost sleep there, but delay in Avalon is dangerous. The quicker you are gone from here, the better your chances. Will hated to admit it, that there was logic in the druid's argument. He glanced quickly at Amberley. She stared down at him silently for a moment, frustrated and angry, then turned back to Eleanor. I want to see my mother before I leave. The druid shook his head. That is not a good idea, Amberley. Her jaw tightened. You seem to think that you have the final say in whatever I wish to do, druid. You don't. I want to see my mother. The demons know who you are. If they know also of your mother, they will expect you to go to her. They will be waiting for you. It is dangerous. Just being here is dangerous. Surely you can find a way for me to spend 5 minutes with my mother. Her eyes drop. Do not be so foolish as to suggest that I should see her when I return. There was an unpleasant moment of silence. Elanon's dark face turned suddenly expressionless, as if he were afraid he might reveal something he wished to remain hidden. Will did not miss the change, and it puzzled him. As you wish, the Druid agreed. He rose. Now you must sleep while you can. We must go. Eventide stood up with him, turning to face his granddaughter. I am sorry that Arion spoke so harshly at the council. He apologized, looking as if he had something more to say, but could not. He shook his head. I think that in time he will come to understand as I did. He trailed off awkwardly, then put his arms around Amberley and kissed her cheeks. If I were not so old, he began emotionally, but the girl put her fingers to his mouth to stop him. She shook her head. You are not so old that you do not see that. You are needed here more than you are needed to go with me. She smiled, and there were tears in her eyes as she kissed him back. Feeling a bit self-conscious, Will stepped away from the table and moved quietly over to the sleeping Manx. The aged wolfhound heard his approach. One eye stared up at him questioningly. On impulse, Will reached down to pet the dog, but Manx gave a low, barely audible growl of warning. Will drew back. Unfriendly beast, the Valman thought to himself. He returned to the others. Eventide shook hands with him and wished him well. Then, with Amberley beside him, Will followed Eleanor back through the floor-length windows into the night.